Right now, if you look at the top pharmaceutical companies on Earth, they are just pouring billions of dollars into artificial intelligence.
Oh, absolutely billions. It's a massive capital influx.
Right. And if you read their C-suite press releases, they are universally expecting these fully autonomous, self-driving bioprocess labs. Like they think it's going to magically synthesize perfect life-saving drugs at the push of a button.
Yeah, a total utopian vision.
Exactly. But if you actually walk down into the physical lab, you do not see an autonomous utopia. You see highly trained technicians spending their entire 12-hour shifts manually pressing mute on false positive temperature alarms. I mean, we have a massive trillion-dollar blind spot in modern biotech right now.
It is a profound structural disconnect. You have executives staring at pristine digital dashboards up in the penthouse, completely unaware that the foundation of their billion-dollar operation is essentially vibrating itself to pieces. They are building these incredibly sophisticated multimodal AI models, massive neural networks designed to ingest everything from genomics to real-time sensor data, and they are fundamentally failing.
Because the data is bad.
Exactly. Not because the algorithm is bad, but because half of the data being fed into it from the physical world is just absolute junk.
So welcome to a deep dive into the hidden architectural bottlenecks of modern biotechnology. Today, we are synthesizing a really dense, high-leverage stack of intelligence. We've got a doctoral-level meta-analysis looking specifically at edge computing in biosensors.
Which is a fantastic paper, by the way.
Oh, it's incredible. We're also looking at the 2026 Benchling Biotech AI report to get the hard adoption numbers. We have a comprehensive clinical review from NPJ Digital Medicine. But the core thread, the mental model tying all of this together, comes from a series of raw internal strategic memos written by a systems architect named Prasad Bond.
Right. He operates as what he calls a quiet architect.
Yes, a quiet architect.
Yeah.
And his entire thesis revolves around this concept called restorative engineering. And I am obsessed with this because he isn't looking at AI through the lens of software hype.
No, not at all. He is looking at it through the lens of industrial design. Specifically, he's taking Dieter Rams' famous minimalist design philosophy, that idea of less but better.
Less but better. It's the ultimate design truth.
Exactly. And he's applying it relentlessly to complex data architecture. He argues that by stripping away the noise right at the source, we can unlock literally billions of dollars in biological efficiency.
So if you're managing capital, or you're just trying to understand where the smart money is actually flowing in this 18% growth boom we're seeing in biotech, you can't just look at the algorithms anymore. Like, the leverage isn't in building a bigger central brain in the cloud. The massive ROI is in fixing the nervous system.
That's a great way to frame it.
Because you could have the most visually stunning, state-of-the-art AI skyscraper in the world, with perfect code running in the penthouse suite. But if you build it on top of a foundation that constantly pumps mud into the plumbing, the entire building fails.
And that mud is exactly what Bond calls the junk data bottleneck. To understand why these massive cloud-heavy AI models are structurally failing in healthcare and biomanufacturing, we have to look at the mechanical realities of the lab floor. We have to look at the actual physics of a bioreactor.
Let's unpack that bioreactor. Because the corporate vision assumes a bioreactor is just this clean digital machine, right?
Like a server rack.
Exactly, like it's a server rack. But in reality, we are talking about a massive 2,000-liter stainless steel vat where living biological products are actively being grown.
Right, we're talking about engineered Chinese hamster ovary cells, monoclonal antibodies, complex vaccines. These are living, breathing, incredibly fragile biological ecosystems.
And they are violently chaotic environments.
Oh, highly chaotic. Inside that vat, you have massive impellers constantly agitating a nutrient broth. You have spargers injecting these micro bubbles of oxygen to keep the cells alive.
Just a completely dynamic, physically messy environment.
Very messy. You have localized heat pockets forming near the mechanical agitation points and cooler zones near the cooling jackets. To monitor all this, the industry uses physical biosensors inserted directly into the vat, so pH probes, dissolved oxygen sensors, temperature gauges.
And those sensors are exactly where the quicksand starts. Because a sensor inside a vibrating, bubbling, swirling vat of living cells isn't going to send a smooth, perfectly flat line of data.
Exactly the opposite. The sensors generate continuous, erratic noise. For instance, a dissolved oxygen sensor might get temporarily blocked by an oxygen bubble.
Which causes a massive spike in the reading.
Right, an instantaneous spike.
Yeah.
Or a temperature probe might catch a momentary vortex of unmixed, slightly warmer fluid. Now, to the sensor, these are massive anomalies. It immediately flags an alert temperature critical, oxygen critical.
But chemically, the overall batch is perfectly fine.
Perfectly fine. The microenvironment around the sensor probe simply fluctuated for half a second.
But the architecture of the system dictates that this raw, uncalibrated, super noisy signal gets bundled up and fired straight into the central multimodal AI model.
And that is exactly where the multimodal model degrades. The source text from the meta-analysis states this with just brutal clarity. It says, the multimodal model fails because half of its inputs are junk.
Junk in, junk out. It's a classic engineering problem, but operating at a billion-dollar scale.
Exactly. You are taking an algorithm designed to find incredibly subtle, high-dimensional geometric patterns in biology, and you are blinding it with basic mechanical static. The AI literally cannot differentiate between a microbubble hitting a probe and a catastrophic biological cascading failure.
Because it's sitting 1,000 miles away in a cloud server, just looking at raw numbers. But wait, I'm stuck on this, though. We are talking about multi-billion parameter AI models built by the smartest machine learning engineers on the planet. I mean, these models can translate dead languages. They can write functional software code in seconds. Why on earth can't the algorithm just filter the static?
It seems like it should be able to.
Right, like if the AI is so smart, why isn't it smart enough to recognize a bubble hitting a probe and just ignore it? That sounds like a failure of the software engineers, not hardware problem.
And that assumption right there is precisely what is causing massive capital leakage across the entire pharmaceutical industry. You're assuming computing power is infinite and instantaneous. But we have to consider the physics of the hardware boundary and the brutal realities of network latency.
Lay that out for me.
Prasad Bond uses what he calls a Feynman compression to explain this. He writes, and this is a great quote, "A central brain cannot make intelligent decisions if the nervous system sends static." Right. If you force a massive trillion-parameter cloud model to spend 80% of its compute cycles just trying to denoise raw sensor static from 10,000 different bioreactors, you're fundamentally wasting the model's capabilities. It's like using a quantum computer to sweep the floor.
Oh, that's such a good analogy. And beyond the waste of compute, there is the latency tax, right? Because processing the data in the cloud happens after the damage is actually done.
This is the critical economic failure point. Think about the physical journey of that data. A biosensor in a bioreactor detects a genuine temperature anomaly, so not a bubble, but a real failure in the cooling jacket. The cells are starting to overheat.
Okay.
In a centralized, cloud-first architecture, that raw signal has to be packaged, sent over a local network, routed through a firewall, transmitted over fiber optics to a centralized cloud server somewhere in Virginia.
Which takes time.
It takes precious time. The massive AI model unpacks it, processes it, realizes it's an out-of-spec event, packages an alert, sends it all the way back across the country, through the firewall, to the local network, and finally, pings the digital dashboard of the lab technician.
And we are talking about biological decay here, like the cells are literally dying while the data is in transit.
Exactly. The round-trip network latency, combined with the time it takes a massive cloud model to process unaligned, raw data, can take hundreds of milliseconds, sometimes full seconds.
Which is an eternity in this context.
It's an eternity. In a highly sensitive, continuous biomanufacturing process, by the time the technician gets the alert and physically turns a valve to adjust the cooling jacket, the biological batch is often unrecoverable. The protein structures have denatured, the batch is ruined.
And in biopharma, a single ruined batch isn't just a minor inconvenience. We are talking about millions of dollars in lost yield.
Millions. The latency tax is simply too high.
So if the cloud is choking on dirty data and network latency is killing million-dollar biopharma batches, we clearly can't keep brute forcing the data to the central brain. The architecture itself has to change.
It has to.
We have to make the nervous system smarter at the exact point of contact, which brings us entirely back to DRAMs and applying less but better to data pipelines.
This is the solution to the junk data bottleneck. And it requires a fundamental pivot away from centralized cloud computing, moving the processing power directly to the physical source. The industry refers to this as edgeai.
Right, edgeai. So instead of treating the sensor as a dumb pipeline that just blasts everything it sees up to the cloud, you install a small, highly efficient AI preprocessor directly onto the biosensor itself.
Exactly. We are talking about putting intelligence directly onto wearable patches, continuous glucose monitors, medical implants, and the local instrument hubs controlling those massive bioreactors.
So the intelligence actually lives at the boundary of the physical world. It acts as a mechanical filter. Its entire job is to strip away the noise, normalize the data feed, and align disparate sensor inputs at the exact millisecond of collection.
That's precisely what it does.
I look at it like industrial water purification.
Yeah.
If you're building a state-of-the-art research facility next to a muddy, turbulent river, you don't pump that raw, silty water into the building and try to install a tiny, complex smart filter on every single laboratory faucet, the break room espresso machine, and the emergency eye wash station.
No, that would be an architectural nightmare.
Right. The friction points would be everywhere, the filters would constantly clog, the water pressure would fluctuate, and half your expensive lab equipment would be destroyed by silt within a month.
The maintenance overhead alone would completely paralyze the operation.
Exactly. Instead, you build one heavy-duty industrial processing plant at the main intake valve outside the building. You aggressively filter the mud, the silt, and the debris right at the source. You leave all the junk outside. So by the time the water enters the building's internal plumbing, it is pristine, crystal clear, and perfectly pressurized.
That is a perfect physical manifestation of Rams's less but better principle. By aggressively filtering out the junk at the edge, at the intake, the central core model in the cloud receives significantly less total data. The volume drops massively.
But the data it does receive is clean, aligned, and highly actionable. You are feeding the AI signal, not noise.
Exactly.
Let's dig into the mechanics of those friction points, because the doctoral level meta-analysis we're looking at synthesizes data from 2023 to 2026, specifically on the Internet of Medical Things, so IoT, wearables, and edgeai. And they found that without this edge filtering, pure cloud systems are hitting a massive performance wall due to data heterogeneity.
Yeah, and data heterogeneity is a massive, often overlooked problem in biotech. When you run a modern lab or you monitor a patient in an ICU, you aren't using sensors from just one company.
Right, you've got a mix of everything.
Right. You have a heart rate monitor from company A, a blood oxygen sensor from company B, and a continuous glucose monitor from company C. These different manufacturers use proprietary data encodings. And more importantly, they use entirely different sampling rates.
Like the frequency they take a measurement.
Yes. One sensor might take a reading 60 times a second, while another takes a reading 100 times a second.
So they are fundamentally out of sync.
Completely out of sync. If you just stream all that raw, unaligned data up to a cloud server, the AI model has to try and stitch it together retroactively. The meta-analysis shows that this lack of universal standards causes a 15 to 30% drop in cross-device accuracy for the AI models.
Wow, just from trying to align the timestamps?
Yeah. The central brain is spending all its energy just trying to figure out which timestamp on the glucose monitor matches the timestamp on the heart rate monitor.
And while the cloud is trying to solve a basic time sync puzzle, the patient's condition is actively deteriorating.
Precisely. Pure cloud systems face 100 to 500 milliseconds of latency just trying to synchronize these different formats over the network. But when you deploy edgeai, the quantitative metrics are staggering.
Give me the numbers.
Edge processing achieves sub-second anomaly detection. It reduces overall latency by 50 to 80% compared to cloud-only setups. You are dropping from half a second of lag down to sub-100 milliseconds for local decisions.
That is insane leverage. In a bioreactor, that is the difference between an automated valve seamlessly adjusting the cooling jacket to save a batch and losing millions of dollars of yield.
It really is.
Okay, but physically, how is this possible? Because we are talking about running complex artificial intelligence. You can't just slap an NVIDIA H100 GPU cluster onto a wearable continuous glucose monitor. When you move to the edge, you are dealing with severe
Floating point numbers are incredibly precise. They can represent numbers with many, many decimal places. Now, this is great for training a massive model on a supercomputer, but doing 32-bit math requires a lot of silicon surface area and a massive amount of electrical power.
It's mathematically heavy.
Exactly. Quantization is the process of converting those heavy 32-bit floating point numbers into much lighter 8-bit integers.
So just whole numbers.
Right. An 8-bit integer is just a whole number between -128 and +127. By doing this, you shrink the physical memory footprint of the AI model by a factor of 4, and you reduce the power required to run the calculations by a factor of 10 or more.
But wait, don't you lose accuracy if you go from a highly precise decimal to a basic whole number? Doesn't the AI get worse at its job?
This is the genius of the architecture. You train the massive, perfect model in the cloud using all the heavy 32-bit math. Once it knows exactly how to identify a specific anomaly, like, say, a specific heart arrhythmia, you aggressively compress it.
Ah, I see.
You prune away all the neural connections that aren't firing, leaving only the essential pathway. Then you quantize the math. Yes, you lose a tiny fraction of a percent of absolute theoretical accuracy, but you gain the ability to run that specific, highly trained neural pathway on a $2 microcontroller drawing 1 milliwatt of power.
That is the ultimate expression of less, but better. Like, you don't need the AI on the smartwatch to write a novel or generate an image. You just need it to perfectly identify an atrial fibrillation event and filter out the mechanical static of the person jogging.
And that is exactly what the IOMT meta-analysis confirms. These optimized edge AI models significantly extend the battery life of wearable devices while providing that crucial 80% reduction in latency.
It's incredible.
The local microcontroller processes the raw sensor data in real time, filters out the movement noise, identifies the arrhythmia, and only wakes up the power-hungry cellular or Wi-Fi connection to send a clean, high-fidelity 10-kilobyte anomaly report to the cloud.
You filter the noise locally, and you only transmit the signal. This completely reorients how we should view AI infrastructure. The constraint isn't the size of the central brain. The constraint is the fidelity of the nervous system.
And once you architect a nervous system that actually delivers clean, aligned data, you unlock the true economic and scientific power of biotech AI. Which brings us to the hard numbers in the 2026 Benchling report.
Yes, let's get into the Benchling report because the numbers are just parabolic. The AI pharmaceutical and biotechnology market was valued at $1.8 billion in 2023. It is projected to reach $13.1 billion by 2034. That is a compound annual growth rate of 18.8%.
Staggering.
For anyone looking at capital allocation, an 18.8% CAGR sustained over a decade is explosive.
And critically, this growth is being driven by actual ground-level adoption, not just speculative venture capital pilot programs. Benchling surveyed the top biotech organizations globally, and 81% of them now use AI in everyday scientific use cases.
The statistic that completely blew my mind was the user interface shift. 89% of scientists in these leading firms now use AI copilots or reasoning tools as their very first stop to interrogate and synthesize data.
Right, it's become the default.
It has literally replaced the traditional search engine and the traditional database query as their default interface with reality.
But if we want to understand why this is working, we have to look closely at where these first real operational wins are happening. The highest adoption rates are deeply embedded in specific daily workflows.
Give me the breakdown.
So literature review sits at 76% adoption, protein structure prediction and analysis is at 71%, scientific reporting is at 66%.
Okay, let's analyze that. Why are those specific areas seeing massive adoption while fully autonomous labs are still basically science fiction?
It goes back entirely to our structural foundation, the quality of the data. The areas with massive adoption are domains where the data is clean, highly structured, and verifiable.
That makes sense.
Scientific literature is structured text. Protein structures, once mapped, have clear physical geometries and rules. The AI can process these domains with incredible efficiency because the inputs are reliable. There is no mud in a protein sequence database.
So the investment logic here is incredibly pragmatic. The smartest teams operating in biotech right now are adopting a specific mantra build, what differentiates, by what scales. They aren't trying to build a monolithic, do-everything AI from scratch.
No, they are investing in hybrid approaches, hybrid human-machine decision-making. They use off-the-shelf scaled AI models to do the heavy lifting of literature review and data synthesis, but they keep the human domain expert in the loop for the critical, differentiated decisions.
And we see this reflected in the talent acquisition data, which I honestly think is the biggest tell in the entire Benchling report. 67% of the top AI talent in these leading biotech firms comes from internal upskilling of their existing scientists.
That is such a crucial point.
Right. Only 21% comes from traditional tech and software companies.
This is a devastating statistic for the pure software industry and a profound validation of domain expertise. It proves that knowing the actual science, understanding the physical realities of the lab floor, the limitations of a bioreactor, the biological nuances of cell decay, is vastly more valuable than just knowing how to write Python code or optimize a neural network architecture.
Because if you just hire a brilliant software engineer from Silicon Valley and put them in charge of a biopharma data pipeline, they will look at the architecture and say, oh, let's just stream all the raw sensor data to a centralized data lake in the cloud, run a massive multimodal model on it, and automate the valves.
Exactly.
They don't realize the biological sample will literally die before the network pings back. They don't understand the latency tax because they don't understand the physics of the product. The biologist knows the constraints of the physical world.
Precisely. You can teach a brilliant biologist how to use a machine learning copilot and how to structure training data much more effectively than you can teach a software engineer the intricacies of molecular biology and fluid dynamics.
And this domain constraint is exactly why AI is currently hitting a hard ceiling in other areas of biotech.
The report explicitly notes where AI adoption drops off a cliff. It drops significantly in complex areas like de novo generative drug design, complex biomarker analysis, and ADME profiling, which is absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion.
Right, and it hits a ceiling in those areas because the underlying data is scattered, incomplete, proprietary, and incredibly hard to validate in the real world.
It is the junk data bottleneck, but operating on a macro industry-wide scale.
You cannot use an AI to hallucinate a perfectly safe, highly effective de novo drug if the training data regarding human metabolism is full of contradictory, unstructured, heterogeneous noise. Like, the AI simply cannot orchestrate end-to-end experiments if the data infrastructure isn't pristine.
Exactly right.
But despite those ceilings, the growth narrative definitely holds. Because the ROI is grounded in physical reality. We aren't just talking about software moving faster. We are talking about atoms moving faster. According to the NPJ Digital Medicine Review, 50% of biotech firms report a faster time to target today. Like, half the industry has measurably accelerated their physical workflows.
And 56% expect hard, tangible cost reductions within 2 years as automation and agentic workflows continue to scale. The reason the 18% growth is sustainable is because AI is doing something fundamentally valuable to the bottom line. It is drastically reducing the trial and error phase of drug discovery.
Historically, drug discovery has been an exercise in brute force, right? High-throughput screening.
Exactly. You synthesize 10,000 different physical compounds in a lab at massive expense, and you physically test every single one of them against a disease target, basically just hoping one of them sticks. It's incredibly labor-intensive and mostly results in failure.
But now, AI-driven virtual screening processes can predict how those 10,000 compounds will interact with the target protein in silico before you ever spend a dime synthesizing them in the physical world.
The AI models can identify potential toxicity and predict side effects before a drug ever reaches a phase 1 clinical trial.
So you are filtering the bad ideas in the digital realm at a cost of practically zero. So you only spend your capital synthesizing the highly probable ideas in the physical realm. You are avoiding late-stage clinical failures, which are the billion-dollar sinkholes of the pharmaceutical industry. That is what drives an 18% the CAGR. It is a massive systemic reduction in wasted capital and wasted time.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of how these models are filtering those ideas. We've talked about the edge architecture, securing the data foundation, and the economic efficiency that results. Now we need to look at the biological efficiency of the core models themselves.
This is where we see multimodal AI's unprecedented ability to uncover the hidden structural geometry within incredibly complex biological networks. Because biology isn't just a list of ingredients, it's a structural, three-dimensional machine.
Right. Let's look at precision medicine. For the last century, healthcare has largely operated on a one-size-fits-all model. You present with a symptom, you get the same chemical intervention as the next million people.
Precision medicine completely dismantles that paradigm. It argues for individualized, data-driven treatment based on an individual's specific genetic makeup, their lifestyle, and their highly specific environment.
But to execute that, you have to actually read and analyze the human genome.
And the human genome is a staggering data set. You're talking about over 3 billion base pairs of DNA. A human researcher cannot just stare at a spreadsheet of 3 billion letters and find the subtle mutation causing a rare disease.
It is entirely beyond human cognitive capacity. The sheer volume of data generated by next-generation sequencing technologies is overwhelming. But this is exactly where AI excels.
Because it can see the patterns.
Yes. Deep learning models simplify this overwhelmingly complex genomic data into clean, essential structural insights. They analyze massive data sets across thousands of patients and uncover high-dimensional patterns in genetic sequences that we literally do not have the biological hardware to see.
I picture genomic data like a billion-piece jigsaw puzzle scattered across a floor. To a human eye, every single piece looks like a blank, identical white square. We have no idea how they connect. We can't see the edges.
That's a great visual.
But multimodal AI acts like a high-powered blacklight. You flip the AI on, and suddenly the room is glowing with hidden geometric lines connecting the pieces together. It reveals the underlying structure of the disease.
That is a beautiful and highly accurate way to visualize it, and we see this structural revelation playing out most dramatically in medical imaging. The NPJ Digital Medicine Review highlights how imaging has been utterly transformed by specific architectures, primarily convolutional neural networks or CNNs and UNet architectures.
Okay, so I understand CNNs conceptually. Like, we've seen them used for years to extract pixel data. A CNN automatically learns to recognize basic edges, that it combines those into shapes, and eventually it can recognize a complex texture, like a tumor in an MRI.
Exactly.
But the clinical review specifically highlights UNet architectures as the standard for this.
Yeah.
Why is a UNet uniquely perfect for drawing boundaries around a tumor compared to a standard CNN?
It comes down to the shape of the architecture itself, which literally resembles a U.
Oh, really?
Yeah. A UNet uses an encoder-decoder structure. In the first half, the network downsamples the image. It shrinks the spatial resolution while increasing the number of feature channels. It is essentially zooming out to understand the broader context of the image, like, what am I looking at? Oh, this is lung tissue, and there is a mass.
But by zooming out, you lose the exact coordinates of where the mass actually is.
Exactly. And that is where the second half, the decoder, comes in. It upsamples the image back to its original resolution to achieve precise localization. But the genius of the UNet is the use of what they call skip connections.
Skip connections.
Right. It takes the high-resolution features from the encoder side and directly concatenates them with the upsampled features on the decoder side.
So it's combining the broad context, like this is a tumor, with the exact pixel-perfect coordinates from the original high-resolution scan.
Precisely. This allows the network to perform what we call medical image segmentation with astonishing accuracy. It doesn't just say, there is cancer in this image. It draws a highly precise pixel-by-pixel boundary, delineating exactly where the healthy tissue ends and the malignant tissue begins.
That's incredible.
And it often does this with more precision, consistency, and speed than a human radiologist.
And the regulatory bodies are actually trusting this math, right? The FDA has cleared over 500 AI and machine learning medical algorithms for market use, and the vast majority of them are operating in this specific medical imaging space.
Because the geometric output is verifiable. It is the definition of structural beauty in AI diagnostics. But the real leap, the biological efficiency engine, happens when we combine these modalities. Multimodal AI integrates diverse streams. It takes that spatial imaging data from the UNet and combines it with omics data, stogenomics, proteomics, metabolomics.
So it's looking at the physical shape of the tumor on the scan while simultaneously reading the genetic mutations driving the growth of that specific tumor.
Yes. By cross-referencing phenotypic changes on a macro level with genomic mutations on a micro level, the AI can discover entirely novel biomarkers. It finds connections between a genetic sequence and a physical disease manifestation that humans never even thought to look for.
And the speed is what completely changes the economics of the industry. The sources give these incredible examples, like AI helped identify a novel liver cancer drug candidate in just 30 days.
30 days.
DeepMind's AlphaFold has essentially solved the 50-year-old protein folding problem, predicting the 3D structures of hundreds of millions of proteins with stunning accuracy. We watched AI play a pivotal role in compressing the COVID-19 vaccine timeline from a historical average of a decade down to under a year.
The acceleration is undeniable. But, and this is a big but, this incredible power to map biology comes with a profound operational cost.
And this brings us to the dark side of the architecture. Because when these models become this complex, when they start finding high-dimensional geometric patterns that humans can't even perceive, the architecture becomes completely opaque.
It becomes a black box.
Right. We can't see how it's making the connections. And when the system becomes a black box, the human operator pays the moral and operational cost.
The black box problem is the single greatest ethical and operational barrier in healthcare AI today. Advanced deep learning models, especially these massive multimodal neural networks, operate across millions of parameters. They can give you a highly accurate prediction, but they are mathematically incapable of explaining how they arrived at it.
So they give you the answer, but they cannot show you their work.
Exactly.
In a high-stakes clinical environment, a lack of algorithmic transparency isn't just an IT annoyance. It destroys clinical trust. If an oncologist is looking at a patient and the AI recommends a highly aggressive, toxic chemotherapy regimen, but the AI cannot explain why it chose that specific drug, the doctor is paralyzed.
They cannot blindly follow a black box when a human life is on the line.
And beyond trust, there is the deeply ingrained issue of algorithmic bias. The geometric patterns the AI finds are only as good as the data it was trained on. If you train a black box model on unrepresentative data sets, it doesn't just reflect those disparities, it systematizes and amplifies them at massive scale.
We see this all the time. The sources highlight some stark examples of this. Dermatology algorithms designed to detect skin cancer were trained predominantly on image datasets of lighter skin tones.
And then what happened?
When deployed in the real world, they showed a significantly reduced diagnostic accuracy when applied to darker skin. And we see the exact same structural failure in cardiology. Risk prediction tools have historically underrepresented minority populations in their training data. When an opaque AI uses that biased baseline to calculate risk, it systematically undertreats certain populations, perpetuating severe healthcare disparities. The math might be executing perfectly, but the foundational geometry it learned is completely warped.
But let me challenge this with a scenario I hear debated constantly in the tech space.
Okay.
Suppose we have a black box model. We know it has some inherent bias. We know it can't explain its reasoning. But in massive clinical trials, it is statistically proven to be 99% accurate at detecting early-stage pancreatic cancer, far surpassing human doctors. Even with its flaws, shouldn't we just deploy it? Like, if the pure math saves more lives in aggregate, why does explainability matter? Why do we care how it got the answer if the answer is right?
It is a compelling utilitarian argument, but it completely fails upon contact with the physical reality of the hospital floor. You cannot separate the math from the psychology of the human operator. To understand why a theoretically perfect but opaque AI fails, we have to look at the phenomenon of alarm fatigue in critical care.
Okay, let's talk about the ICU.
Walk into a modern intensive care unit. The central monitoring systems are incredibly sensitive. They blanket the ICU nurses with constant, unceasing alarms. Every minor fluctuation in a patient's heart rate, every slight dip in oxygen saturation triggers a beep, a flashing light, a digital alert.
It's the junk data bottleneck again, but this time the bottleneck is the human nervous system.
Exactly. A nurse on a 12-hour shift is subjected to hundreds, sometimes thousands of alarms. The cognitive load is crushing. And what happens? The human brain adapts by filtering out the noise.
They just start ignoring them.
The nurses learn to routinely ignore the alerts. They mute them without even looking. It is a documented psychological phenomenon known as alarm fatigue. The signal-to-noise ratio is structurally broken.
So if you introduce a 99% accurate black box AI into that environment and it flashes an urgent alert to a nurse,
the nurse will ignore it because they do not trust the system and they cannot verify the machine's logic in the moment. A perfect algorithm is entirely useless if its design ignores the attention span and the cognitive reality of the human operator who actually has to administer the medicine.
And this is exactly what Prasad Bond critiques in his memos. He looks at this dynamic and points out a profound moral cost. When C-suite hospital executives categorize alarm fatigue as an acceptable operational loss, or they blame the nurses for making errors, they are deflecting blame.
They are passing a structural data architecture failure directly onto the shoulders of exhausted critical care nurses and bioreactor technicians.
It's a total failure of empathy and engineering. And this is why Bond's concept of restorative engineering is so incredibly vital. The mandate is super clear. Technology must restore human safety, human dignity, and operational agency. AI must serve the operator. The operator should not serve the AI.
Absolutely.
So how do we actually build that? How do we cure alarm fatigue and break open the black box without losing the biological efficiency of the models?
It requires two structural changes. First, transparent design logic. We must mandate the use of explainable AI, or XAI. We have to design models that inherently provide interpretable outputs.
What does that look like mechanically?
In medical imaging, it looks like a saliency map. Instead of the UNet model simply spitting out a text alert saying malignancy detected with 95% confidence, it uses techniques like gradient-weighted class activation mapping.
Okay, so generating a heat map.
Right. It generates a heat map overlaid on the MRI, highlighting the exact pixels and textures that most strongly influenced its prediction.
So it actually shows its work. It says, I think this is cancer, and I think that because this exact cluster of jagged pixels right here.
Exactly. The human doctor maintains their agency. They can look at the highlighted pixels, cross-reference it with their years of clinical experience, and verify the machine's logic. The AI becomes a high-powered tool, not an unquestionable oracle.
And what's the second structural change?
We have to solve the data privacy and ownership hurdles that prevent these models from getting diverse, unbiased training data in the first place. Traditionally, to train a massive healthcare AI, you have to pool millions of patient records into one centralized data lake.
Which is a regulatory nightmare. Between HIPAA in the US and GDPR in Europe, hospitals are terrified to move patient data. So the models end up trained on narrow local data sets, which creates the bias.
Precisely. The decentralized savior for this is federated learning. Federated learning completely flips the architecture. Instead of moving the sensitive patient data to the central AI, you move the AI to the data.
You trained it at the edge.
Exactly. The central cloud server sends a copy of the base AI model down to Hospital A. The model sits securely inside Hospital A's local firewall. It trains on their local, highly diverse patient data. It learns the geometric patterns. Then it computes the mathematical updates, the gradients and weights. It encrypts just those mathematical updates and sends them back to the central server.
Oh, wow. So the central model aggregates the math, gets smarter, and updates itself, but the actual raw patient images and genomic sequences never leave the local hospital servers.
The patient data is completely secure. It preserves privacy, it allows hospitals to maintain ownership of their data, and it allows the global AI model to train on a massively diverse, decentralized dataset, which directly attacks the root cause of algorithmic bias.
It all comes back to the core thesis. Whether we are talking about federated learning, tiny ML on a biosensor, or explainable AI in an oncology ward, the goal is the same. True 100% bioprocess autonomy is decades away. The C-suite vision of a lab that runs itself is an illusion right now.
The immediate requirement, and where all the smart capital is flowing, is the hybrid human-machine partnership.
You have to give the AI clean, filtered data at the edge, and you have to give the human operator a quiet, transparent, trustworthy dashboard. Less but better.
Less but better.
And this brings us to the most important takeaway. Because you don't have to be running a pharmaceutical bioreactor or managing a chaotic ICU floor to suffer from the junk data bottleneck. The architectural principles we've unpacked today apply to almost every complex system, including your own life.
The physics of information processing remain constant, whether you are a neural network or a human brain.
Think about your own business operations, your personal productivity, or your daily decision-making processes. We all have a central brain, our attention. And if you are constantly feeding your attention with noisy, uncalibrated, unfiltered inputs like if you are reacting to every ping, every notification, every unverified piece of data that crosses your screen, your outputs are going to degrade.
You will suffer from your own personal version of alarm fatigue.
Exactly. The signal-to-noise ratio of your life will break. A central brain cannot make intelligent decisions if the nervous system sends static.
It's a powerful mental model.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the architecture of biotech, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Look at the systems you manage in your own life and career. Are you constantly trying to build a smarter, more complex central brain to process all the chaos? Are you looking for a better algorithm to manage the mud? Or do you need to stop, look at the architecture, and install a simple mechanical filter at the edge to just block the noise from entering the building in the first place? Less, but better.